Today, everything fell into place. Every strange glance, every misplaced excuse, every rewritten memory, it all suddenly made sense. And it all started with a single letter. I found it by accident, tucked away in the bottom drawer of Laura's desk, buried beneath old tax documents and forgotten receipts. A yellowed envelope, addressed to no one, its edges frayed as if it had been handled too many times. Something about it felt off. Laura was meticulous, obsessive even, about keeping her papers in order. So why had she hidden this one? I hesitated before opening it, my fingers trembling slightly. The first few lines were innocent enough, a recollection of a first meeting, two strangers locking eyes across a candlelit restaurant. But the restaurant was wrong. It wasn't our restaurant. And the year she described? It wasn't the year we met. I read further, my pulse quickening with every word. The letter detailed a love story that never existed, at least, not between us. It spoke of a different man, of whispered promises and stolen moments. It spoke of love, but not our love. The more I read, the colder I became. The name at the bottom of the letter wasn't mine. I set it down, my hands tightening into fists. Laura had always been good with words, good at shaping narratives. But this was something else entirely. She hadn't just betrayed me, she had rewritten history. And I needed to find out why. I sat there for what felt like hours, the letter resting on the desk like a loaded gun. My mind raced, replaying moments I had once believed to be the foundation of our love. Had she rewritten everything? The restaurant in the letter, some upscale French bistro, wasn't where we met. We had met at a small Italian place, one of those dimly lit neighborhood spots where the air smelled like garlic and red wine. At least, that's what I had always believed. Had I been wrong? No. I wasn't the one who had changed the past. I needed answers. Moving through the house, I felt like a stranger in my own life. The framed photographs lining the hallway suddenly felt like stage performances, captured smiles disguising a truth I had been too blind to see. I stopped at one picture, our anniversary in Paris. She had seemed distant that night, though she'd blamed it on jet lag. Now, I wondered if she had been thinking of him. I grabbed my laptop and typed the name from the letter into a search bar. Nothing. No social media, no LinkedIn, no public records. It was as if he didn't exist. But Laura was careful, always covering her tracks. If she had erased him from her past, she had done it thoroughly. Frustrated, I scrolled through my phone, scanning old messages, emails, anything that might give me a thread to pull. Then I found it. A single email, buried in her archives. Subject, can we meet? From a nameless Gmail account. Date, 2 months ago. The message was short. We need to talk. I can't keep doing this. Laura had replied the same day. Not here. Not like this. I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening around the phone. Not here? Not like this? How long had this been going on? I suddenly felt sick. I looked back at the letter, at the way she had rewritten our love story into something else, something manufactured. And then it hit me, she wasn't just having an affair. She was rewriting the past so she could justify leaving me. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The walls of my home felt like a crime scene now. Every framed picture, every carefully arranged book on the shelves, every detail that once felt ours now seemed like evidence of something else, something false. Laura had been planning this for months, maybe even years. That letter wasn't just a keepsake or a mistake. It was a farewell she had been drafting in secret, erasing me from her story one detail at a time. I needed to know how deep this went. I started with the easy things. Her phone had always been off limits, but she was careless with her laptop. It sat open on the kitchen counter, just as it had every evening when she read the news with her coffee. Her password? The same one she had used for years, my name, followed by the year we got married. How poetic. My hand shook as I navigated through her emails. At first, there was nothing suspicious. Work updates, shopping receipts, the usual clutter of daily life. But then I saw a folder labeled Memories. It wasn't just the name that unsettled me. It was the fact that it had been created recently. I clicked. Inside were dozens of photos, some I recognized, our wedding, vacations, birthdays. But then I found the others. The ones I had never seen before. Laura, smiling in a dimly lit bar, a glass of wine in her hand. Laura, her head tilted towards someone just outside the frame, the kind of intimate lean you don't share with a stranger. And then, finally, Laura, standing with a man. A man I didn't know. Tall, dark-haired, dressed too sharply for casual meetings. His arm was slung over her shoulder with an ease that made my stomach twist. In the picture, she wasn't pulling away. She wasn't uncomfortable. She was glowing. I clicked the details. The timestamp read 7 months ago. 7 months. That was when she had started acting distant. That was when the late nights at work had become more frequent. That was when the past, the one we had built together, started to slip away. I scrolled further, searching for anything that would give me his name, his identity. And then I found it. A video. My pulse roared in my ears as I pressed play. Laura's voice filled the room. "You know I love you, right?" The man's voice was low, amused. "Then why haven't you told him yet?" Silence. A heavy sigh. Then Laura again, quieter this time. "Because Ethan doesn't deserve that. I just need to find the right way to end things." The screen went black. I sat there, my hands trembling, my breath coming too fast. This wasn't just an affair. This was an escape plan. A carefully orchestrated rewrite of history where I wasn't the man she loved. But if she wanted to erase me, she was about to learn that I wasn't going quietly. I replayed the video until the words burned into my mind. Ethan doesn't deserve that. I just need to find the right way to end things. End things. She had already decided. The Laura I loved, the woman who once swore I was the love of her life, had vanished long before I found that letter. In her place was a stranger, someone capable of deception so thorough she had rewritten our history, turning me into a footnote in her real love story. But she had made a mistake. She had underestimated me. I closed the laptop, my pulse steady now, my mind clear. I wouldn't confront her yet. No, that would be too easy, too merciful. If Laura wanted to manipulate time, to distort reality until I was nothing more than a shadow in her past, then I would give her a taste of her own game. I was going to rewrite her story. Step 1. The setup. The first thing I did was print the letter. Not just one copy, several. I placed them in different spots around the house, slipping one between the pages of her favorite book, tucking another inside her nightstand. She had tried to erase me. Now, she would start finding pieces of her own deception lurking where she least expected. Next, I altered our memories, at least the physical ones. I swapped out photos, replacing them with altered versions. A Photoshop trick here, a subtle change there. The anniversary trip to Paris? Gone. In its place, a picture of me alone in the city, standing on the Seine as if I had gone without her. Our wedding photo? Replaced with an older picture, one from a past relationship she barely remembered, another man standing beside her in formal wear. It wasn't about gaslighting her. It was about making her question what was real, making her doubt herself. She had done it to me for months, maybe years. Now it was my turn. Step 2. The unknown caller. I found the man's phone number easily enough. A few digital footprints, some clever searching, and there it was, the same number from the email, linked to a local gym membership. His name was Daniel Carter. I created a new email, anonymous and untraceable, and sent him a single message. "She's been lying to you, too." I attached the video. No explanation. No threats. Just the undeniable truth of her words. Then I waited. Step 3. The final push. That night, Laura came home late. She dropped her purse on the counter, sighing dramatically, as if exhausted from a day of pretending. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my voice even. She nodded. Work was brutal. A lie. She kissed my cheek. Habit, not affection, and walked into the bedroom. I followed. She froze when she saw the printed letter on her pillow. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, might spin another elaborate story. But then, something unexpected happened. She laughed. A soft, bitter laugh, shaking her head as she picked up the page. "So you found it," she murmured. I stayed silent. She looked up at me then, her eyes unreadable. "What now, Ethan? Are you going to scream? Break things? Ask me why." I studied her, feeling nothing but a quiet, eerie calm. "No," I said. "I already know why." She tilted her head. "Oh, and what have you decided?" I smiled. She had no idea. "You'll see," I said. And for the first time in our marriage, I was the one keeping secrets. She thought she had me figured out. For years, Laura had been the puppeteer, pulling invisible strings to reshape our past, twisting our love story until I no longer recognized it. She thought I would react like a fool, shouting, crying, begging for answers. But I wasn't playing her game. I was rewriting her story now. She sat on the edge of the bed, the letter crumpled in her hands, watching me carefully. I could see the gears turning in her head, calculating her next move. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice soft, almost pitying. I shrugged. "Long enough." A flicker of something crossed her face, Was it relief? Had she expected me to find out? Or worse, had she wanted me to? She sighed, smoothing out the letter as if trying to erase the creases. I didn't want it to happen like this, Ethan. No. I tilted my head. How did you want it to happen? Were you waiting for the right moment? The perfect scene to stage your exit? Her jaw tightened. That's not fair. Neither is rewriting our history. A pause. A tense, weighted silence. Then she said something that almost made me laugh. You don't understand. It was always that, wasn't it? The excuse of liars, of cheaters, of people who buried their guilt beneath layers of self-righteousness. But I let her think she had the upper hand for just a little longer. I sat down across from her, meeting her gaze. Then explain it to me. She hesitated, her fingers twisting together in her lap. He was someone I loved before you. I stayed silent. I already knew this, but I wanted to hear her version. She exhaled sharply. We had a past. And I buried it. I told myself I had moved on, that you were the right choice. But when I saw him again, it was like she trailed off, searching for words that wouldn't make her sound like the villain. It was like I had been living someone else's life. Someone else's life. So that was it. She had decided our life together was a mistake. That I was the mistake. She leaned forward, her expression desperate now. I didn't plan for this to happen, Ethan. I never meant to hurt you. I almost laughed at the cliché of it all. She never meant to hurt me. As if rewriting our love story and gaslighting me for months had been an accident. I stood up, stretching out the silence between us. You never meant to hurt me, I echoed, nodding slowly. That's good to know. She watched me, waiting for my next move. I smiled. Let her wonder. Then, I walked out of the bedroom, leaving her alone with the letter, the first of many surprises still to come. Because while she had spent all this time rewriting the past, she had forgotten one thing. I still controlled the ending. She didn't follow me. I had expected an argument, a plea, maybe even a weak attempt at more lies. But instead, she stayed in the bedroom, sitting in silence with the letter clutched in her hands. It was a strange feeling, walking away and knowing that, for once, she was the one left with unanswered questions. But this was only the beginning. I spent the next day watching her carefully. I wanted to see how she would react now that she knew I knew. Would she change her routine? Make a panicked phone call to Daniel? Try to twist the truth into something more palatable? At first, she did nothing. She still moved through the house as if it were any other morning. She made coffee, scrolled through her phone, lingered by the window as if lost in thought. But I saw the small cracks beneath her facade, the way she flinched when I walked past her, the way her fingers hesitated over her phone before setting it down. She was waiting for me to make the next move. I almost wanted to let her sweat a little longer, to let the paranoia build until she crumbled under the weight of it. But I had already set things in motion. I left the house without a word. The meeting. I had texted Daniel early that morning. We need to talk. In person. He hadn't replied at first, probably wary of a confrontation. But a few hours later, a message came through. Where? I gave him the name of a cafe near his office. Public enough to keep things civil, private enough for what needed to be said. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a corner table, stirring a cup of coffee with unnecessary focus. I studied him as I approached. He was younger than me, but not by much. Sharper features, a polished look, designer watch, tailored coat. He looked like the kind of man who had always gotten what he wanted. But today, he looked nervous. Good. I slid into the seat across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I broke the silence. So, how long? Daniel exhaled, shaking his head. Look, man, how long? I repeated, my voice steady, cold. He looked away. A year. The words hit harder than I expected, even though I had already suspected as much. A full year. 12 months of lies, of rewritten memories. I nodded, letting the weight of it settle. And you knew she was married. His jaw tightened. She told me it was over between you two. That she was only staying for convenience. I almost laughed. Convenience. That was what I had been reduced to in her mind. Daniel leaned forward, his expression shifting from guilt to frustration. She was never supposed to be with you, Ethan. You were just the easier choice. There it was. I smiled, slow and knowing. And yet, here I am. And here you are, waiting for her to finally choose you. His eyes darkened. She has chosen me. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Has she? Then why is she still in my house? Wearing my ring. Daniel had no response. I let the silence stretch before delivering the final blow. You don't have her, Daniel. You never did. You were just the escape plan, the safety net. I tilted my head. But here's the thing about people like Laura. She doesn't want a safety net. She wants control. And she'll rewrite your story, too, the second she gets bored. His expression faltered. He wanted to argue, to defend whatever illusion Laura had built for him. But deep down, I could see it, the seed of doubt, taking root. I stood up, dropping a few bills on the table. Good luck, I said, my voice quiet, almost amused. You're going to need it. As I walked away, I didn't look back. But I didn't need to. I had already won the first battle. And Laura had no idea what was coming next. When I got home, Laura was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone. She didn't look up when I walked in, but I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers hovered over the screen like she was debating sending a message. To him, no doubt. Good. Let her wonder. I set my keys down on the counter. Quiet day. She blinked, startled by my casual tone. Yeah, she said, hesitating. Where were you? I shrugged. Out. For the first time, I was the one being vague. And from the way her brow furrowed, she hated it. Her grip tightened around her phone. Ethan, I held up a hand, cutting her off. Not tonight. She frowned. What? I walked past her, heading toward the bedroom. Not tonight, Laura. You don't get to decide when we have this conversation. I do. The words hit their mark. I saw it in the way she exhaled sharply, in the way she bit her lip, like she wasn't used to me taking control. Like she didn't know who I was anymore. Good. I closed the bedroom door behind me, leaving her alone with her thoughts, with the doubt I had carefully planted. And now, it was time to set the next phase into motion. The game begins. The thing about rewriting a story is that it only works if no one else remembers the original version. Laura had spent months, maybe years, slowly reshaping the past, making herself believe that I was the wrong choice, that Daniel was the love she was meant to have. But what happens when the past starts fighting back? I had spent the last few days gathering evidence. Not of her affair. I already had enough proof of that. No, I wanted something more powerful. Something she couldn't twist. So I started with our memories. I called her friends. The ones who had been around since the beginning. The ones who had seen our relationship bloom before she had started rewriting it. Casual conversations, lighthearted questions, just enough to remind them of the truth she had been trying to erase. Hey, remember our first anniversary? That ridiculous road trip we took. Oh man, do you still have those photos from our engagement party? I lost mine. Little things. Little details. But soon, the echoes of our real history would surround her. And when she tried to claim that our love had been a mistake, that she had never been sure about me, she'd find a world that no longer backed up her version of events. She thought she could manipulate time. I was about to remind her that time fights back. The ticking clock. The next morning, Laura was different. She moved carefully around me, studying me like she was trying to figure out what I knew, how much I had uncovered. Good. Let her feel it. As we sat at the breakfast table, I finally decided to speak. You're awfully quiet today, I said, stirring my coffee. She looked up, caught off guard. I don't know where we stand. I smirked. You mean, you don't know where you stand? Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Ethan, please. We need to talk about this. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Oh, we will. I let the silence stretch, let her feel the weight of her own uncertainty. Then, just when she started to fidget, I said, but first, I think you should check your messages. Her face paled. Her phone buzzed at that exact moment. I knew who it was before she even looked. Daniel. She hesitated, staring at the screen as if it might explode in her hands. And then, slowly, she unlocked her phone. Her eyes scanned the message. I watched as her lips parted, as her breath hitched. I knew what it said, because I had made sure of it. We need to talk. He knows. She looked up at me, horror dawning in her expression. And I smiled. Because now, she was the one losing control. She read the message twice, her fingers tightening around the phone like she could strangle the truth out of it. Daniel had cracked faster than I expected. Good. I had played him perfectly, fed him just enough doubt, made him wonder just enough about his place in her story. And now, he had turned on her. Laura swallowed hard, her eyes darting to me, searching for some kind of confirmation, some way to gauge how much I knew. Ethan, she started, her voice thin. I can explain. Don't, I said simply, cutting her off. She flinched. I took a sip of my coffee, watching her carefully. What are you thinking right now? I asked, my voice almost casual. That you can fix this? That you can talk your way out of it? She set the phone down on the table, exhaling sharply. I don't know what you want me to say. I tilted my head, studying her. Not much of a storyteller when you're put on the spot. Huh? Her lips parted, but no words came out. I stood up, slow and deliberate, leaning in just enough so she could feel the weight of what was coming. Tell me something, Laura. When exactly were you going to leave me? She blinked. Ethan, You don't have to lie. I gave her a smirk. I already know about the letter. The emails. The meetings with Daniel. I leaned back, letting my words sink in. So, tell me, how was my story supposed to end? Her eyes shimmered with something close to panic. She wasn't used to being on the other side of manipulation, wasn't used to feeling powerless. I let the silence stretch. Then, finally, she whispered, I don't know. I let out a slow breath. That's the first honest thing you've said to me in months. She looked away, pressing her palms against her temples like she could physically hold herself together. I never meant for it to be like this. That's the second. A bitter laugh slipped from my lips, but it held no humor. I picked up my phone, tapped the screen a few times, then slid it across the table toward her. Her breath hitched when she saw it. The video. The one of her and Daniel. The one where she admitted she was only staying with me until she could figure out the best way to leave. Her hand shook as she reached for the phone, her eyes locked on the damning footage. This, she breathed. How did you? I smiled, slow and knowing. You thought you were the only one who knew how to rewrite reality? She looked at me then, truly looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than guilt or panic in her eyes. I saw fear, because she realized what I had been trying to show her all along. She wasn't the one in control anymore. She sat frozen, her fingers hovering over my phone like it might burn her. The video played in silence, the words she had once spoken so carelessly now hanging in the air like a death sentence. Because Ethan doesn't deserve that. I just need to find the right way to end things. Laura inhaled sharply, her shoulders shaking. I could almost hear her mind racing, calculating, rewriting. She was searching for an escape, a way to twist this, to regain control. But there was none. She finally looked up, her face pale. What do you want? I smiled, slow and deliberate. Now that's an interesting question. She licked her lips, glancing toward the doorway as if she might run. She wouldn't. Not yet. There was still too much she didn't understand. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Let's be honest, Laura. You're not sorry you lied. You're sorry you got caught. Her mouth opened, but I wasn't done. You spent months, maybe years, rewriting the past, making yourself believe that I was the mistake. I tilted my head. But here's the thing about stories, they belong to both people in them. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I watched her carefully. So, again, what was the plan? Were you going to leave in the middle of the night? Pretend this was some mutual decision? Or were you going to make me the villain so you could walk away guilt-free? She looked away. Answer me, I said, my voice sharp. Her jaw clenched. Then, in a breath so quiet I almost missed it, she said, I was going to tell you next week. A slow rage curled in my chest, burning low and steady. Next week. She had been sitting across from me every night, sharing meals, sleeping beside me, pretending, all while knowing she had an expiration date set on our marriage. I let out a breath, shaking my head. Unbelievable. I didn't. I held up a hand. No more lies, Laura. Silence stretched between us. I studied her face, searching for something, remorse, shame, anything. But all I saw was exhaustion. She wasn't heartbroken. She wasn't devastated by what she had done. She was just tired of pretending. That's when I knew. She had never planned to fight for this. For us. I sat back, nodding slowly. Okay. Her brow furrowed. Okay. I stood, reaching for my phone and slipping it back into my pocket. We'll do this your way. She frowned, shifting uncomfortably. What does that mean? I smiled. It means you'll get exactly what you wanted. I gestured toward the house. This? Us? It's over. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Maybe she had expected me to scream, to beg, to break down. Maybe she had wanted that. But I wasn't giving her anything. Her voice wavered. Just like that. I shrugged. You already decided how this ends, Laura. I'm just making it official. She swallowed hard, her gaze searching mine. What are you going to do? I chuckled, shaking my head. That's the best part. You don't know. Her fingers tightened into fists, her breath coming faster now. I turned, walking toward the door. And just before I left the room, I said the words that I knew would haunt her. You spent all this time trying to erase me from your story. I glanced back, my smile cold. But you forgot one thing. She stared at me, wide-eyed. I get to write the ending. Then, I walked away. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of heartbreak. No, that had already passed. What I felt now was something colder, sharper. A clarity that cut through every lie she had ever told. Laura had spent months, maybe years, rewriting the past to fit her betrayal. Now, I was going to erase her first. Step 1. The exit strategy. I had no intention of dragging this out. Divorce wasn't a question. It was inevitable. But I wasn't about to let her slip away clean, rewriting history one last time to make herself the victim. So I got ahead of the story. First, I sent out a few messages to our closest friends, the ones she had been subtly turning against me for months. Nothing dramatic, just enough to plant seeds of doubt in their minds. Hey, just so you know, Laura and I are separating. Not my choice, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. I knew Laura. She would try to frame this as a mutual decision, a slow-growing distance that we had let happen. But now? Now, people would start asking questions she wasn't ready to answer. Step 2. The paper trail. She hadn't asked for a divorce yet, but I knew it was coming. I also knew that she would try to position herself favorably, maybe push for more than she deserved, maybe try to rewrite her financial history the same way she had rewritten us. I wasn't about to let that happen. That night, while she slept in the guest room, too ashamed, too afraid to share a bed with me, I gathered every document I needed. Bank statements, property records, receipts for every expensive thing she had pushed me to buy, every luxury she had justified as a shared expense while she planned her escape. And most importantly, I backed up the video. The one of her and Daniel. The one where she admitted she had chosen to stay with me, not out of love, but out of convenience. She had tried to erase me, but I had just made sure she couldn't erase herself. Step 3. The first cut. In the morning, I made my move. Laura sat at the kitchen table, staring at her coffee like it held the answers to the mess she had created. She looked tired, like the weight of her own lies was finally pressing down on her. She didn't even look up when I placed the manila envelope in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I slid into the chair across from her, calm, composed. "Divorce papers." She flinched like I had struck her. She opened the envelope with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the documents. I saw the moment she realized this wasn't just a preliminary discussion. I had already started the process. You already filed?" she stammered. I nodded. "Yesterday." Her lips parted in shock. "But we haven't even talked about this yet." I arched an eyebrow. "You're right. We haven't. But you didn't plan on talking, did you, Laura? You planned on leaving." I leaned forward, watching her squirm. "So I just made things easier for you." She shook her head, her eyes glistening. "Ethan, please." I held up a hand. "Save it." For once, she obeyed. I stood, grabbing my keys. "Take your time reading them. The terms are fair. You walk away with exactly what you brought into this marriage." Her breath hitched. "That's—" I smirked. "A problem?" Silence. That was the thing about people like Laura. They wanted to win, but they never prepared for the moment when they lost. I turned toward the door, my voice calm, final. "You spent so much time planning your exit, Laura." I opened the door, stepping outside into the cold morning air. "I just made sure you had one." And then, I left. Because I wasn't the one being erased. She was. Laura didn't call me. She didn't text. For the first time in years, she had no script to follow, no story to bend in her favor. I had taken away her ability to control the narrative, and now she was floundering in the wreckage of her own deception. And I enjoyed watching it happen. The fallout begins. By the time I returned home that evening, she was still at the kitchen table. The divorce papers were spread out in front of her, a half-empty cup of coffee beside them, long gone cold. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes hollow. "You really filed?" I set my keys down, shrugged. "Wouldn't want to keep you trapped in a life you didn't want, Laura." Her hands curled into fists. "You don't get to act like you were the one who ended this." I let out a short laugh. "Oh, but I did." She glared at me, her jaw clenched. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I tilted my head, considering. "Enjoying it? No, but I am satisfied." She scoffed, looking away. "Of course you are." She didn't know what to do with me anymore. I wasn't playing the part of the wronged husband, the one who begs for explanations and fights for something already lost. No, I had stolen her spotlight. I had rewritten her ending before she could, and she hated it. The unraveling. "You really think you can just cut me out like this?" she asked, her voice sharp, desperate. I raised an eyebrow. "I don't think, Laura." "I know. Her breath hitched, and for the first time, I saw something real in her expression. Fear. Because she was starting to realize that I had stripped away everything she had planned for. She had wanted an easy escape. A clean break, where she walked away with the version of the story that suited her best. Maybe she had planned on painting herself as the woman who had tried, the one who had suffered in silence before finally choosing herself. But now? Now, she was the one being discarded. Now, she was the one being left. I leaned against the counter, watching her struggle for control. You thought you could rewrite the past, Laura. But the problem with rewriting history, I smiled, is that people remember the truth. She exhaled shakily, gripping the papers like they might disappear. And what about you? She asked. Do you really think you'll just walk away from this without looking back? I met her gaze, unblinking. I already have. A pause. A flicker of panic in her eyes. Good. Because this was the moment she realized I had beaten her at her own game. And I wasn't done yet. Laura didn't cry. I had wondered if she would, if, in the end, she would try to salvage something, anything, by letting herself break down in front of me. But she didn't. Instead, she sat there, motionless, staring at the divorce papers as if they held some hidden escape she hadn't yet discovered. They didn't. She had spent so long manipulating the past, rewriting our love story to suit her betrayal, that she had never prepared for this outcome, for me to be the one walking away first. She swallowed hard. Is this really it? I nodded. It was over the moment you decided to rewrite us, Laura. You just didn't expect me to write the ending first. Her lips parted, but no words came. Because she knew I was right. I grabbed my jacket, pausing for just a moment at the door. I looked back at her, at the woman I had once loved, the woman I had built an entire life around. A part of me had expected to feel something, a final wave of grief, maybe, or the dull ache of regret. But I felt nothing. She had spent months, maybe even years, erasing me from her heart, from her story. And now, she no longer existed in mine. I exhaled softly, almost amused by the irony of it all. Goodbye, Laura. She blinked, as if she hadn't truly believed I would go through with it until that very moment. And then, without another word, I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. The epilogue. A week later, Laura moved out. A month later, the divorce was finalized. 2 months later, I heard from a mutual friend that she and Daniel had fallen apart. It didn't surprise me. He had only wanted the version of Laura she had created for him, not the one who had rewritten a love story just to escape it. And me? I didn't look back. Because the past was the past. And I was finally free to write a future that was mine. The end. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.